Hi everyone. Today I'll just be giving a just brief commentary on my recent BEX clear for DDP DOJ Black Label. I'm playing this on the new M2 shot triggers port, so this is one of the first things I wanted to kind of tackle um, with the new port is just getting it clear, not just with BS, which will always be my favorite ship. Um, I'm saying that kind of tongue-in-cheek, but you know, instead of that with Xe, which I wanted to do for a couple of reasons, but I think the first and most important thing was just to learn the stages better, because as you know, with BS, you actually get larger bomb stock than with the other shot types, and so Xe actually gets the least amount of bombs, and so I felt like I had to learn the stages better. Although I think we'll get to stage 5 and talk more about that in a bit. Stage 1 is pretty basic if you're trying to tackle this clear with BEX for the first time. Um, you're not going to run into any issues here, although I'll just say right now, in case you didn't watch the other video or you're not familiar with this game, that scoring to get the score extend is pretty important. So there's two total. There's one at, I believe, 20 million and one at 50 million. I could be missing a zero somewhere. And so part of an easy strategy for hitting those score extends is that you build up enough hypers for part of stage 2 that I'll tell you about in a bit. But in order to set that up, you should try to get all of the bees in this stage as possible, or all of them if possible, and that will actually double the score that you get from bees in the subsequent stage. And that really helps you make your way towards getting those additional lives to help you finish the game better. And so if you just rewind, you can see that I did, in fact, get all the bees for this stage. And so you can kind of see it's not exactly very difficult. I didn't really follow a route for this stage to get them. Just be aware of where they are. And actually, the shot triggers port gives some like coordinates for the bees also in the menus, which I don't have enabled now because I find them a little bit distracting. But that could be a really good resource for helping to learn what the bees are the first time. With that aside, we're just talking about stage 1 boss here now. There's nothing really notable at this boss, and nothing that's, warrants any more exposition over what I talked about with the boss previously. But I just wanted to make a note. Yeah, you can see that I did make a mistake there, so I accidentally killed one of the side pods while it wasn't spinning. And so usually, if you're not familiar, if you kill a side pod while it spins, it actually gives you 2 hypers instead of 1. This kind of goes again into what I was talking about with trying to get as much score as possible in the latter half of this stage, stage 2, to help make progress towards those score extends, because having more hypers gives you better score in that section. But for the most part, having 4 hypers going into that section is not so bad, so I continue the run. Stage 2 is mostly the same as far as stage 1 goes. It's kind of not super intense, and you can kind of kick back and make your way towards that really lucrative section that I keep saying that I'll talk more about. I do also try to get all the bees in this stage, although I think it's not strictly necessary if you're going for survival and you're just focusing on that. Of course, you'd want to do as much as possible to max out your score, and it gives you something to do while you're otherwise going through this stage. It's nice playing BEX because your laser is just so strong, and that's something that you never really get to experience with BS. So you can use your laser in a lot of situations where you'd have to be holding down the shot and dodging things unfocused with BS. Here's the stage 2 mid boss. Really simple, goes down very quickly with BEX, which is really nice. Okay, so here's a lucrative section that I was talking about. Basically, you want to have as many hypers stocked here as much as possible. And then at a certain point, which is now, you're going to activate all of your hypers at once. It's going to build a large hit counter. And then, while you're building up the hit counter with all of these enemies on the screen in this section, you're going to be trying to collect the bees. And so if you collect these bees at the locations that I'm showing in the video here, at high hit counts, it actually gives you quite a high score. So basically your hit count is a multiplier that gives you a point value based on when you collect the bees at that hit value. So, that being said, you know, I'm well on my way towards that first score extend. If I had done things correctly, getting 2 hypers from that pod, I would have been at my first score extend already. But that's okay, we'll get it pretty soon. Here I'm just going to do you know, a very simple strategy using a hyper in order to go through that first pattern. And then I use a bomb here with the intention of picking up that bomb carrier. But I got a little bit too focused on dodging this next pattern, and I missed that bomb carrier, which was pretty disappointing. So you can see, you know, I'm trying to avoid this pattern, and I'm going to try to get it right here, but no, it's already off the screen. So that's a pretty big mistake at this point, because not only, you know, am I going to be 1 bomb down going into stage 3, which is actually not that bad, all things considered, but I also miss out on the point bonuses that I get from having a max bomb container, which is something that's also important, you know, as far as scoring goes, at least to my understanding. So, you know, the score isn't looking too hot here, having made those mistakes, but all things considered, I'm still on track for the clear. So stage 3 is where things start to get kind of intense and where kind of the first wall happens when you know, start playing this game for the first time. I think playing EX definitely makes this a bit easier to get through than BS because, you know, as I said before, you can laser a lot of large enemies and get some consistent damage to take them out, like in this section, for example. And you can take advantage of the large shot from BS to take out some of these, you know, large turrets. So I think that's really the strength and probably why they give you fewer bombs, because you have really an easier time in the stages. I start by point blanking this mid box a little bit just to get some life down, although I didn't do it as much as I would have liked. If you point blank it enough, actually you can skip this entire phase and go straight to win this phase when both arms are down. A little bit off route here, but you know, thankfully I don't have to pay for it. I then go to the bottom right of the screen here to anticipate this wave of enemies, this Zako rush, so that I'm streaming to the left in order to make sure I have enough room to clear it. So here I pick up that bomb, which is why I said that, you know, missing out on that bomb wasn't the worst thing in the world, because you get another one at the midpoint in stage 3. And we're going to this very routed section. So this section is really fun once you kind of learn the route, because when you approach it for the first time and you don't know where to be on the screen at a given point, things overwhelm you really quickly. But if you just follow kind of what I'm doing here, it really does a lot to misdirect all the Zako bullets and make the screen a lot nicer, a lot easier to navigate. There's going to be one kind of dicey section later. This isn't it. Actually, that was actually it. So yeah, where things seem to be a little hectic, and maybe that's the part that could benefit from further routing, but thankfully, you know, it went fine. You just have to be cognizant of when those big ships are going to shoot their large guiding bullets. Here's a safe spot. I've mentioned this before, and you know, it's, if you see any video on this, it's pretty, you know, it's pretty well used. So yeah, just take a note of that. Sorry about that really brief bit of lags. I was actually petting my cat when I was recording this, and he, you know, rubbed his head on the joystick and caused it to slow down a little bit there. So I had to quickly go, oh crap, you know, and then I readjusted the speed. So here's Genbu, and you're going to see the worst Genbu fight of your life. I somehow did worse in this fight than in my, you know, BS clear, which I don't know how that's possible. But, you know, this is always the pattern that gets me, right? And it wasn't even that fast. It was just something that, you know, sometimes happens, and it was a shame that it happened during this run. And by this point, I was kind of resigned to the fact that this was likely not a clear. Just because, you know, I died with bombs in stock, I believe, and it was a very, I guess, deflating way to die. No, but thankfully it seems like things worked out. So with BEX, you get to Genbu's last phase a lot sooner than BS. So I was kind of, that's another point in its favor as far as survivability. There, I don't even know what happened there. I think I was just kind of mentally resigned at that point and didn't really think that I was going to clear, so I don't know. Shmups are a mental game, of course, and I was losing at that point, and so at some point I decided, okay, let's just bomb and see how far I get throughout the run, and thankfully things worked out. But it wasn't looking good at this point. Going down 2 lives to Genbu means that I really have to, you know, do very well in stage 4, and also try to minimize the amount of resources I use in stage 5, which is kind of finicky. This beginning part of stage 4 honestly doesn't feel too much different than VS because I'm usually in like full auto a lot of the time. You can see one really important thing to do in this particular section is you need to be holding the shot button and anticipating where the Zako Rush enemies are, the ones that shoot those blue needle bullets you see right there. Because if you don't take them out as soon as they appear on the screen, they do kind of this, where it becomes really difficult to avoid some of their bullets. Especially since they're so long, you know, the needles. I really hate this type of bullet pattern, or this type of bullet in general in DDP games, because, you know, chances are you're going to run into the tail end of something. It's not like nice and concentric like these red bullets, for example. They're a bit longer. So here is the rail section. You'll see here that I also kind of go off route and make a pretty big mistake. Overall, like, this section is also like a section that's very conducive to using full auto, just because you're gonna be clearing the screen of the Zako while also destroying the turrets on the big tanks, which is, you know, really effective. Here you can see I make a mistake. I didn't anticipate that last tank, or I forgot it was there, so I had to kind of do an around the world dodge. Thankfully I didn't have to, you know, I didn't die, but that was actually really lucky. That was nothing to do with skill. It was just kind of like a panic move that happened to work out. So after the tank section of the rail section, you want to kind of stick in the middle of the screen, holding full auto, to kill all those larger enemies. Because otherwise they really flood the screen, and it becomes, you know, you have to use a resource at that point. You have to use a hyper or a bomb. So we're coming up to the extend cannon. And here I'm just using the same strategy as before. I actually try to go for the no hyper strategy, but I just mispositioned myself right here. So you can see, if I were better at the game, instead of going to the left when that extend cannon shot its like last barrage of bullets, I would have gone upwards, and it would have misdirected that pattern downwards, and I would have been able to kill it without the hyper. But, you know, this is just a fail-safe. It's good to have backups in case your primary strategy doesn't work out. And having a hyper at this point isn't too bad, because you can kind of make your life in this zipper section a little bit easier. So the point of this section is just that you want to take out the zipper enemies as fast as possible. And so if you have the opportunity to laser them, with EX, they go down pretty quickly. But in this case, sometimes, you know, they don't line up correctly, or you're not confident in them dying before you get overwhelmed. It's fine to use a resource, and that's precisely what I do here. And we're going into stage 4 boss. So I have 2 extends, 1 bomb. I'm still at the point where I really have to do very well in this boss fight in stage 5 before I can clear, because I have 1 extend coming in, and I'll probably get it somewhere in stage 5 at this rate, given my poor performance earlier in the run. So for this pattern in particular, what I recommend doing is staying on the bottom left of the screen and making very small movements. I find that in a lot of patterns in Danmaku games, and especially DOJ, it's never really good to be wiggling around the stick or, you know, your control pad, moving yourself unnecessarily, because the chances that you'll accidentally position yourself into a bullet is pretty high. So in keeping still, you actually can, you know, make sure that the movements you're making are accurate and will let you avoid bullets. And here there's a very easy bomb to basically skip that last portion of the fight. You know, if you were going for score, there's actually a pretty lucrative hyper milk there on that stage 4 boss, but I didn't really want to do it there. I didn't have a hyper anyway. I would have had to use my bomb and then kind of time it out, or go to the next phase. Anyway, so I have 2 extends, hopefully going to get the 3rd one soon, and we're in the beginning of stage 5. So these large enemies also kind of emphasize macro dodge, to be able to do consistently, just because, you know, otherwise it's very difficult to kind of wade your way through the large streams of bullets that it's creating. I didn't talk about it at the moment, but those large 3 tanks, you want to make sure you start on the left side. And with EX, it's very easy. So here I'm showing off this, kind of exploit of the first stage 5 mid-boss, where if you hyper and kind of stand right on top of it as it goes into this phase, it tracks your position, and usually if you're hugging the bottom of the screen, it's going to track you all the way to the bottom, you're going to have to dodge those gigantic lasers. But if you abuse the invulnerability frames of the hyper to kind of push it on top of the screen, those large lasers don't go the entirety of the screen, so you can kind of just sit back and shoot the hell out of it while it's kind of just flailing itself, which is kind of cool. Here's the honeycomb section, which, is with EX is a little bit easier. Because you can use laser, but I really don't know how to use it effectively in this part, so I just kind of follow my BS route, where I hold auto the entire time. And I don't think it's a bad strategy, because as I said before, you might be doing less damage and killing the bigger enemies less fast, but the fact that you take care of the Zako at the same time as you're doing damage to the big enemies makes it a bit easier to wade through those bullets. And the fact that I'm at like a lower hyper rank, I'm at hyper rank 2, means that the bullets move slow enough such that I can kind of choose when to make a cutback, which is kind of a luxury. I don't think that, I would usually have that privilege. We didn't really talk too much about stage 5 mid-boss 2, because it's really simple, nothing really special there. I also believe that using full auto, like having all those shots pollute the screen, also help with the slowdown a little bit. So it creates more slowdown and allows you to kind of get through that honeycomb section a bit easier. For this mid-boss 3, the only advice that I have is that when it does this pattern, the one with the fireballs, so what you want to do is hug, if you're standing where I am right now, you want to hug the right side with the balls falling down, and if they're about to land on top of you, then you dodge, because there is a large hitbox of just fire on your left side, right? And so you don't want to be hugging that wall, because at any point it might kind of move itself a little bit, and then you'll die. But if you kind of hug the part that has more open space, then you can dodge whenever that space gets occupied by like a dropping lava ball. Anyway, I kind of, during that explanation, I took a death there, but it really was, just me kind of making a mistake. Thankfully, I'm still in a pretty decent spot. I have the last score extended now, so I have, 2 lives going into basically the end part of stage 5. And I would have had way more resources if I hadn't just completely flubbed the Genbu fight. But at this point, I'm thinking, like maybe there's something here. I managed to get through a lot of difficult sections, executing, well enough that I didn't have to, or I'm in kind of a similar position than if I had, instead of not dying on Genbu, had died on, a harder part of stage 4 or something like that. So here I made a mistake where you can see that I didn't position myself on the far left, so I was getting walled by those gigantic tanks. Usually what you want to do is kind of sweep from left to right in order to destroy them, and that makes the subsequent pattern a lot easier to dodge. And you wouldn't have had to use resources there, or I wouldn't have had to. Bombed that last part just because I know I have an extra one coming up, and I have 2 extends going into the Koryu fight, which is really nice. So this fight is always, I don't know, to me, even though I've practiced it a bunch, it's still kind of unpredictable. And maybe it's just because I don't really have much experience fighting this boss, because with BS, at the point where I was at this stage, I knew that I was going to get the clear because I had like a ridiculous amount of bombs left. But because I'm playing BEX this time, I have to actually know what his patterns are. Of course, that doesn't mean that I know how to dodge them well. So here's a pattern that, despite practicing a bunch, I really have no idea how it works. I know that you want to be hitting the gaps and going through the lines of red as much as possible, but whether it opens or whether I eventually get walled is still a mystery to me. This last pattern, I learned how to kind of wade my way through, and it really involves just point blanking it and going through one line of bullets at a time. I think it's static. But because I had a bomb, I just thought, okay, I might as well save the extra life. And yeah, I think that's basically the clear. If I had to give my impressions of BEX, I definitely think my clear arrived, definitely a lot quicker than BS because of the fact that I had a lot of the experience. And it was easier to go from BS to BEX than I would imagine going the reverse because my ship only got more powerful and it kind of reinforced my feeling of, okay, I want to get better at routing the stages and learning more about them in order to overcome some of my weaknesses where I would just bomb some of the sections that were less familiar. So now I feel like I understand the game better, and going from BS to BEX kind of supports that natural progression. Whereas if I had gone the other way around, I would have just been like, wow, why is my laser such garbage? It wouldn't have been very fun, to be honest. Um, that being said, I'm eager to continue digging my hands into the M2 port. I think it's a lot of fun. Thanks for watching.